What is the single worst year in human history? It's 541 AD, but in order for me to give some context, let me first explain the second worst year of human history, 1918. The greatest war the world had ever seen, battles fought on all fronts, armies significantly larger than ever before, but perhaps what made this war so deadly was the rapid modernisation occurring through this period. From the beginning of the war, with outdated Napoleonic tactics, to using chemical weapons and tanks on the battlefield. But this wasn't the worst of it. The influenza outbreak began in February 1918 and would go on to kill 20 million by the end of the year, the first year on record in which deaths exceeded births. So, back to 541, and what's worse than a pandemic? How about a second pandemic? The plague, later to be titled the Justinian Plague, was potentially just as deadly as influenza. However, while influenza killed 2% of the population, the Justinian Plague killed 20%. On top of this, in 536 several volcanoes erupted, creating a chain reaction leading to the stratosphere being covered in aerosols, and world temperatures falling by 2 degrees Celsius. Then, again, right as the world was recovering, in 540 another volcano erupted. World temperatures fell by another degree, affecting people from Europe to China to the Americas. The cooler temperatures led to a forced migration of people and animals. Blocked sunlight meant crop failures and famine. Conditions like these would lead to the typical person giving up, submitting to the gods. But many use this as an opportunity to prove they're worth more than anyone bargained for. Perhaps the greatest example of this is with a name you may recognise, Emperor Justinian. Ever since the West had split from the East, every new emperor dreamed that they one day would reclaim their lost land. But of course, only Justinian had the true sense of direction. From beginning his reign in 527, it would only be till 535 he would begin his reconquest. Except, it would be the next year that the first volcanoes would hit. Nevertheless, he persevered, and through his domination of the Vandals and Goths, reclaimed the North African breadbasket and prized city of the Seven Hills. Then, another volcano hit, along with a never-seen-before plague in 541. Keep cool, and you will command everyone. Perhaps it was Justinian's strong desire to succeed, or just the smell of warm ash in the morning. Either way, Justinian immediately took control of the situation. Case in point, he recalled his best general from Rome to deal with the crisis in Armenia. See, with the largest plague the world had ever seen, and farmers starving from a disappointing bleak summer, the world was low on willpower, low on manpower, and low on funds. Such conditions Justinian was able to exploit when he invaded the West, who were comparably incompetent at dealing with affairs as well as he. However, after 5 years of brutal warfare, even the Roman Empire was struggling. Now, it was the Sassanid Empire's time to exploit. The second great power of the known world, once dismissed by the Emperor Justinian, was able to invade the important and tactical city of Divin in Armenia. A huge embarrassment to Justinian. Let's check in with what's happening in China. Meanwhile, the strange case of Justinian. Attempts to reclaim Armenia proved unsuccessful after a failed siege, but he was able to ravage the countryside. Events in the West weren't looking too positive either. A new Gothic leader, Totila, gained monumental support in Italy by freeing the slaves and distributing land to the lower classes. By winter, Totila had managed to strike the Goths' first major victory against the Romans in the Siege of Verona, despite having a significantly inferior army. Decades of constant warfare, plagues and volcanic winter will lead to the world, and especially Italy, draining in population, diminishing the eternal power of Rome, and along with it, the Roman Empire. Justinian would continue to lead until his death in 565, eventually conquering all of Italy, but at what cost? Perhaps the empire was stretched too thin. Italy would be conquered by the Lombards 40 years later, and northern Africa by the Rashidun Caliphate 80 years later. Rome would never rise again.